Very good. Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay. I am going to first talk about what we're doing. We're waiting for one more person that's important to join, but I'm going to start anyway. I'm going to start by saying that this is our WheresSpot event. We've done a bunch of them. I think some of you have joined us before. This is a different one for us. This is a little bit different. As we were going through the last couple months, I've been looking at a lot of spots, and I came across a couple deep fake spots that were really, really done well. And they are produced and directed by a director who's going to join us momentarily, Zach. And I'm going to show those two spots. One was done with Putin, one was done with Kim Jong-un. And I thought they were fantastic and really, really well done. And it got me thinking, what is the uses that we can have in television commercials? And B, what are the moral issues that we have there? And finally, what does it really take to do them well? Because it's clearly we've made that next move. We have come to a point where we can actually fake these things, and they're almost to the point where you can't tell whether or not they are real or not. So joining us today are going to be me, Michael Porte. I am one of the founders of WheresSpot, along with Perry Schaefer, who's also in there, and Jonathan Shipman, who's joined us recently in the WheresSpot management team to help us move along some of these new ideas that we're trying to come up with. This is going to be, as I said, about three different things: deepfakes, creative and morally. How do they do it, and what's it take to really do them well? And the two people that I've invited to join us, Zach Math is the director of the two spots I've been talking about with Playtime Media. He will be joining us momentarily. And Fathy Yassa, who is here with us already, is the CEO and president of Speech Morphing, a company that does what I would call deep fake audio. And they're coming up with some really interesting new technology as well. So not only do you see somebody's face and make it look like it's them, but it's also you're seeing, you can hear them and you can make them say whatever they want to say. So those are our teams. I'm going to leave this up here for a second so that people recording can see this, and you guys can go back later, but some of the links for what I'm doing are right here. Okay, hold on one second while I stop sharing this screen, and let's watch a couple spots.
America, you blame me for interfering with your democracy, but I don't have to. You are doing it to yourselves. Polling stations are closing. You don't know who to trust. You are divided. There are strings we can pull, but we don't have to. You are pulling them for us.
Okay, there's one, and here is Kim Jong-un.
It's a fragile thing, more fragile than you want to believe. If the election fails, there is no democracy. I don't have to do anything. You're doing it to yourselves. People are divided. Your voting districts are manipulated. Voting locations are closing, so millions can't vote.
Okay, be right there. Okay.
Is it not hard for democracy to collapse? All you have to do is nothing.
Great. Okay, can you still hear me? Great, fantastic. Okay, while I was doing that, you heard my phone probably ring. That was Zach joining us. So, Zach, are you with us?
Zach is connecting to audio.
Oh, okay. So while Zach is coming on, those are the two spots he directed for Represent Us. Okay, Zach is here with us. Are you there, Zach? There he is.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We just watched your two spots while we were waiting for you.
Oh, great.
What I'd like to say, sorry, now that we're all here and I can feel a little bit better that we're actually moving forward on this thing, there's a couple things that were important to me about those spots. One is that, A, they were fabulous. You couldn't tell if they were real or not at first glance. I mean, if you look carefully, there are things that make it feel like they're not real, and also, what they're saying. And what I liked about it at the end is that they said, this is fake, and that's the moral question. So, again, I think we have two people that we've invited today who deal with this on a daily basis. Well, not on a daily basis. Zach is a director. He doesn't do deepfakes as a normal day-to-day thing. He's a director. He directs a lot of comedy. He has great casting. He does a lot of things that are very interesting. It was an interesting choice for them to come to you, Zach, for this project. And I may say you did a fantastic job. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what it is that happened. What's the creative thing that came to you when you were asked to participate in this spot? And how did it come to you? And if you can introduce yourself a little bit about yourself first, that would be great, Zach.
Yeah. So Zach Math. I directed a bunch of TV spots, specifically in America, certainly in the last 15 years. I think specifically to deepfake in your question, I think the spots or the opportunity, it was kind of actually sort of a little bit unusual, in the sense that the usual process is, someone sends you a project and you kind of begin the process to sort of maybe bid on a project or collaborate on a project right away, depending. This one was, I was very much looking for, I being Canadian, not being able to vote and actually sort of, vote with my vote. I wanted to contribute in some way to this idea that this community, this culture that I spend a lot of time in, and that I have a lot of friends that I love, and so. I was kind of looking for something to kind of take my skills and try to, offer them up in some way. And so that became sort of a confluence of my want and Greg Hahn's new company, which is Mischief at No Fixed Address. So Greg Hahn was very much looking to do the same thing. We had sort of a relationship somewhat, with a lot of the work I was doing at BBDO in the past years when Greg was kind of heading up that company. And so, we just quickly found some synergies just in terms of our mutual philosophies and our want and desire to do something. And deepfake actually came from them. They were really interested in that as an idea and a concept. And I think what you were referring to is specifically the idea of the whatever you want to call it, like the medium becomes the message, in the sense that, there is this problem out there of a bunch of fake news or people trusting certain news sources and certain pieces of information. And it seems to be definitely central to some of the major problems, or part of some of the major problems. And so it seemed to be sort of a good way to kind of go at it. And specifically to kind of call it out in the end, that hey, not only we did we want to sort of communicate this message for Represent Us, which is a great organization that is just saying, hey, look, let's just have fair and just elections. It doesn't matter what side of the program you're on. People's votes should be counted, and everyone should be given the right to vote, and there shouldn't be any gerrymandering or anything, so any funny business going on to sort of prevent a democracy from working how it should, which is everyone should be able to choose, have the right to have a say in choosing the representation, all the stuff that we all know. Yeah. So, but from a filmmaking standpoint, the deepfake idea came from them, and that became the process. And initially, we looked at from a creative standpoint, I initially was like, and I'd done some work in the past where I manipulate existing footage, and that's where my head went. But very quickly, because of the scripts and understanding that we needed to control what these people were saying, it became really evident quite early in the process that, in fact, what they were proposing was, in fact, like the best way to do this with deepfake technology.
Great.
So,
so it's interesting. Let me just interrupt for a second and go back to the creatively. So creatively, it was really the problem that they were trying to solve was the solution, in a sense. So their solution was part of the issue. So when they're thinking creatively, and I've been thinking a lot about this, using deep fakes in a creative way, is I can see it solving a problem, and we'll talk about solving problems later. And when Fathy starts talking, we'll also talk about solving issues like I need to do X, Y, and Z. This was really started as a creative idea. And I think that's why they came to you as a director for it, because it's really, they needed more than just a deep fake. They needed a creative solution for the issue that they were trying to solve. So when you finally came together with this idea of a deep fake, what did that create in your head as what came into your head as whether this is a something that is scary to do, or an idea that's like, am I treading on down a road I don't necessarily want to go?
Yeah, it's funny, but to my earlier point, I mean, you start deferring to your normal bag of tricks, so to speak, and or your normal paintbrushes or whatever metaphor you want to use. And so it was technology that I hadn't worked with before, but that kind of was part of the excitement. And as soon as we started testing stuff out, it was clear to me that this was definitely the way to go. And specifically with deepfake, I don't know. One of the learning curves for me was that the performance is very much driven by the actor. So there's a base actor that's actually performing. So while they look like they are, just news clips that are stolen, and maybe people might think, and a lot of people thought we just manipulated the mouths or something, it's in fact, an actor on the base level, and then the actor is styled to look, to varying degrees, to look like the subject you're trying to deepfake. In this case, these two dictators. Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, respectfully. But we really wanted to control what they were saying in their performances. And so, it became quite clear that we had to creatively cast and get the performances we wanted. And then what was neat was seeing how much it's not just digitally painting on faces, but the deepfake technology goes a step further. And it's really about, it learns all the nuances and the gestures and stuff like that. And so it articulates that, taking the driver from the base level performer, the actor, and then it interprets it on top. And so there's varying degrees of success with that interpretation based on the amount of inputted learning footage that you actually have of that particular, in our case, dictator that we wanted. So with Kim Jong-un, there was very little footage of him without glasses.
I interrupt right there. So this was something when you and I talked the other day, it was really surprising to me that it was actually that you brought in an actor, and you said that you had done some tests to do it, see what was the best way to do it. And I was surprised that that was what it took. And so it's much more complicated than just taking a piece of footage and manipulating it. You're really casting somebody, you're shooting them, you're going through the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at deepfake, you get a bunch of different variations of it. So like some of it's people putting their face on a Star Trek character or something, in already existing footage, but they're using the voice of the actual sort of base subject. In our case, we wanted to control what the subject was actually saying, and without using all the tricks of mouth gesticulation and stuff like that, which never looks right. And so the thing that deepfake does is it kind of gets all those little nuances of how people's faces move and all that stuff that if it's off, the human eye picks up on. It cancels that stuff out and almost does it properly. And so, but you really need that base performer. And then to your point, the casting process, which I actually really loved, was it was sort of twofold. It was the bass performer and the actual performance of this actor. So the accent, right? How do you get an authentic Russian accent? How do you get an authentic Korean accent, which is really the guy that played Kim Jong-un actually, he talked like he was, from Brooklyn or something to me. But his parents were, he said, oh, look, I grew up with, he was an amazing actor. He grew up with his parents were Korean with heavy accents. And he's like, he just snaps right into it. And he was able to sort of to perform. And then of course there's the physical component, which can't be, you can't have someone that's a brilliant actor and you get all the gestures you want, but is so physically off that it just doesn't work. You're just not buying. It doesn't look like as good as a deep fake can be, whether the body stature of Kim Jong-un, or the hair, the very unique hair or whatever, it had to be done right. And so with this actor in particular, with Kim Jong-un, didn't have the girth, let's say, of Mr. Owen, and didn't have the hairstyle, but had enough hair that we could then style it. And so we kind of, just to give you an idea of the balance of like what percentage of deep fake, adding to or saving the physical, getting close to the physical stature, and then what percentage was performance. We very much had the performance driving it. And then, so it was about 75, 80%. And then what we noticed is the deep fake, we could stretch, we did some stretching and stuff like that to make up for some of his slender issues, if you will. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about what it took? I mean, I know you're not the guy doing the coding and the manipulation of the deep fake, but how much time does it take? What's the learning process? And how long did that whole process take for you guys? And who did it?
So the gentleman who actually did it is like, these guys are like, it's really, I mean, he was, these guys are, a lot of them are, they don't want their names out there. So it's like, I was like, come on, you should really be talking on this thing, talk to the technical aspect of it. Speak to it, but he just, he's a pretty kind of quiet guy, and he was sort of more into the heavy political sort of, screw turning, than he's just, these guys are really private and have secret names and all this stuff. But it was cool getting an insight, because we would do secret calls with him and stuff like that to kind of talk to him about stuff. And it typically took, to answer your question specifically, it typically takes probably like 48 hours ish to kind of, if you have all the proper learnings ahead of time, to kind of turn something in 48 hours to 24 hours, depending on how much information is already kind of, so there's the feeding of information, the learning process, which can take up to a week, if you're feeding information in. And then there's actually putting the footage that you want to have the deep fake painted onto. And so that typically took about 24 to 48 hours, depending. And
how much material did you guys provide the material of Kim Jong-un, for instance, and give it to them, and then he spent a week off by himself putting that in, or?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a two-pronged process. I mean, we had a search on our end, and he had a search. It was really a team. I mean, it was like any good projects, they're collaborations, and it was just everyone wanted to. To just do a really good job, and so it was just all about the work. So he was finding stuff, we were finding stuff, I was on Image Bank, and everyone was just kind of piecing it together. But regardless, the more information, the better. And I think, again, the unique part of Kim Jong-un is deepfake doesn't handle eyeglasses that well yet, and so there's a so then it became the challenge of footage without eyeglasses, so the less footage you have, there is some stuff that I wish was a little bit better. And then I think the second part of your question, just to answer quickly, is we provided him with obviously the base footage of the actor and the sets and everything, and styled hair and everything. And as soon as that was provided, he could kind of go to work and kind of cook it. And then there was some slight manipulation of stretching and stuff that I wanted to do to kind of just instead of putting a ridiculous suit on the actor, I wanted to do that digitally in terms of his body type. sort of affect that. So we would hand all that to the deepfake artist.
Well, I think you guys did an incredible job, and I think not only was it great creatively, and I was hoping that the creatives were going to join us today, but I guess they got called off on another project, so they're not. But they, you know, it was a good idea, well executed, and I think that it's pretty amazing. I would like at this moment to introduce Fathy, who is an audio, a guy who does audio deep fakes, and I think he'll correct me. It's not a deep fake; it's something a little bit different. But he's using technology now to create voices, so that you can not only do what you did, a deep fake, where you take somebody's voice and change it to somebody else's voice, but you can also take that same technology, and it'll be interesting for commercial use. And for instance, take a script that you write, feed that into the computer, and it'll come out speaking it in that person's voice. So there's a lot going on in audio as well. And I know you guys had to work to try to get a voice that was similar and sort of fake it. This is one step more. So I want to let Fathy talk. His name is Fathy Yassa, his company, which I spelled incorrectly on my intro. So we'll fix that. But it's speech with an E, which is the correct spelling. I don't know what I was thinking. So his company is Speech Morphing. And Fathy Yassa, Fathy, can you join us and take over for a minute and give us who you are, what your company does, and what it is? You know, I don't know as much about the audio piece as I do about the video piece. So I'm really curious to learn more.
I'd love to. Sorry, I jumped the gun ahead of your introduction. I was just trying to fill the space until you're ready, but let me start over again. I'm Fathy Yassa. I'm the CEO of Speech Morphing Systems out in Silicon Valley in California. Of course, everybody's scattered after the COVID bomb shell, so we're all working remotely, obviously, right now. So I live in Santa Cruz, and it's been quite an experience being away from the office. Other than that, the whole idea behind what we're doing is started actually 10 years ago when I was licensing content from all over the place, or everywhere in the world. Essentially, I mean, from all languages, essentially, English, French, Spanish, Italian, Arabic, you name it. And and I was licensing the content for the purpose of doing mobile video on demand, actually. And I'm an engineer by training, and it's been quite an experience licensing that content. So the thought was at that time was, why can't I dub the movies instead of dubbing the movies in local actors' voices? I want to dub the movie in the original actor's voice. And that was obviously the trigger for what we're doing right now, and that is to be able to replicate a person's voice to the extent that you wouldn't be able to recognize whether it's a recording or an actual computer-generated voice from training to that specific voice. And not only that, but also be able to take that and make it speak another language in their own voice, whether they speak the language or not. And not only that, but also make it speak the language, the second language, in an accent as if you just learned the language. And we all know how it is when you learn a new language. You have your own native accent jumping into the mix.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? If I get this correct.
Yeah.
Since it's computer sound in a sense, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't need to know the language. You're giving them the language, you know, either written or a spoken form, and the computer then takes that without knowing the language, but creates a version of what you want to do in a different language.
Okay, so let me come to that. Let me come to that.
Okay.
And I can make that same voice speak without an accent, as if it were native voice, speaking that other language. So what it is that we feed. Assume that you wanna do what you did with Putin or with the own. Have them speak French as an example, right? Knowing that we have modeled their original voice in a language that we have mastered in our system. So they would be recording for us in Russian, and we would model that voice in Russian, and then we would make that as part of our multilingual system. Then I want them to speak French, so I use it's a French text, feed it into the system, and select that specific user and say keep it in the original accent, or go and make it a native. So let's assume that we're going to make it a native. It will come out on the other end in French because I have French in my system, and it will come out in his voice, speaking as if he knew French from his childhood.
Wow.
And same thing go. And in the main key here is that we would have that language as part of our system, the original as well as the target. So knowing that, we started doing that, and we started developing the technology to be able to achieve that. And today we have that high quality enough that I can replicate anybody's voice in the original language, of course, by only 10 minutes of training from that specific voice. And we're moving our way down to 5 minutes and less. Eventually, we're going to just push a button and it will come out without even training, with very little training. Let me put it this way: with very little training, and we'll be able to produce anybody's voice in the same language as well as in a second language. We can also, part of our system is the main idea in producing content with just by feeding the text in, is to be able to control the style and control the melody in the voice. So each one of us, as we all know, have his or her own way of speaking, just like myself.
So it's interesting. I'm going to jump ahead here, and then I want to play some of the. You gave me a couple files, but I would just say I'm working on a commercial right now. Today. It's because of COVID, they don't want to do a whole new commercial. They're taking a commercial we did last year and revising it with new dates and new prices. And it's centered around Black Friday, but instead of it being a 1-day thing, they now want it to be 2 days. So it's basically the same script. It's basically the same guy. They had to go back to that guy. They had to hire him, come in, just fix those little teeny pieces, then edit it in and put it together. What you're saying is that I could now, in this case, just type in a new script, train it based on this guy's voice, and then have the new script come out in his style and his voice, and we wouldn't need him in a sense.
That's exactly right. And all we need is actually the original track, the voice track, and we can train from there. We don't need the guy anymore. We can take the original track or the original recordings that he did for probably more than just 15, 20 minutes originally, and we can train the system on that voice, and then we can give you the access to the system, and you just type the new text in and you produce the whole new clip without needing him at all. As long as you have, on the moral side, as long as you have the license.
As long as you have, I'm not saying we want to get rid of the actors.
No, I know, because that question comes up all the time.
Right. If he's not available, and or it's it's too far away, or we're COVID, it's like there are positive. What I'm saying is there are positive uses. It's not all about fooling people. It's about maybe just getting something done. So I have a couple.
On that note specifically, we're working on documentary and movie restorations, old stuff where the actor is not alive anymore, and we can bring the actor's voice back from the era where he recorded that specific movie and fix the movie that way.
Can I ask a basic question? This is Jonathan. It's just in terms of the voiceover or the voice, how much control do you have in terms of inflection and the way that the voice comes out? Like having been in many a recording studio and doing multiple takes trying to get the right reading. How do you go about doing that in this format?
Excellent question. We built our system specifically to be able to do that, where we build libraries of the different styles and moods and so on, and we give you the tools to be able to fine tune. And we have a tool that's being built or partially built, and it will be continuing. The build will continue, that we call speech tuner, where you're going to be able to adopt specific intonations and inflections and so on from somebody and impose them on somebody else. So you're going to be able to fine tune the voice to the extent that you want it, just like an audio engineer sitting in front of their knobs, fine tuning the audio.
Right.
So let me, you've gave me a couple files. I think, let me share my screen and see if this works. You might have to help me through this one too.
Sure, same process, just share the audio and it will play.
Great, okay. Share computer sound. It is here. Okay, boom. Okay, I'm not sure which one's which, but let's start with this.
Emerging from its burrow, the badger's first priority is answering the call of nature. It digs special latrines for the daily toilet. The forest is alive with the sounds of its countless inhabitants. The quiet churring is from two badgers engrossed in the most intimate of acts. Should their union prove fruitful, she will give birth to young a year later. The fertilized eggs will remain dormant within her until the following spring.
Well, that's exciting.
So let me comment on that. This clip is for the audio restoration experiment that we did. Those are 5 segments spoken by the same voiceover. One of them is computer generated. The others were recordings from the original documentary. If you would be able to tell which one it is, I would love to hear that, because this is one of multiple experiments that we have done for a studio in Italy, actually. I don't know if anybody was able to tell which one is the computer generated versus the actual recordings. There is one in the middle of these 5.
Everybody,
listen to it one more time.
There's 4 pieces in this clip. One of them is created.
It's the deepfake.
Okay, here we go.
Emerging from its burrow, the badger's first priority is answering the call of nature. It digs special latrines for the daily toilet. The forest is alive with the sounds of its countless inhabitants. The quiet churring is from 2 badgers engrossed in the most intimate of acts. Should their union prove fruitful, she will give birth to young a year later. The fertilized eggs will remain dormant within her until the following spring.
That's pretty good.
It is pretty good.
Which one was it? I won't embarrass
it. It was the one. Anybody?
I'm just going to go with the toilet line, but that's just
based on.
I'm sorry. The clue. Huh? Go ahead.
I was just guessing. I was just saying the latrine, the digging the toilet line.
Well, the clue to the computer generated one, it has a click before and after. So if you play it again, you'll figure that out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we won't do that now, but that was
why don't you go ahead to the other 2? Yeah. Okay. So that's an example where you cannot tell whether it's a recording or the original voice recording or the actual replacement. The other 2 are voices recognizable by everybody, I hope, and we wanted just to show the resemblance. And we're making them, and of course, these are copyrighted voices, most likely, but at the same time, it's used here for under fair use for demo purposes only. Okay. And the voices never, in our training, we never used that text to train the voice, and we imposed the text from other things to see how well it comes out. So go ahead.
Big tech companies came under fire in Congress over concerns about their market dominance and business practices. The CEOs of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google's parent Alphabet argued there's plenty of competition and that it places pressure on them to constantly innovate. The Wall Street Journal.
Okay. So I recognize that voice. I also hear that it's it feels computer generated.
Yeah. We have better quality than that. This was only an experiment, making that person. Everybody is able to tell who that is. Morgan Freeman, I think. If you didn't guess yet, and we were experimenting for actually news reading in a recognized voice. Of course, we're not going to use it, but we wanted to demonstrate that you can do any branding voices. So branding voices are very essential in today's market, in my opinion, and being able not to have them go back to the studio all the time, like you were saying earlier, as long as you have the right license, then that's a feasible thing. Of course, the quality today is much better than that.
Okay.
And as you heard it from the other clip,
yes, from the first clip. Okay, yeah. Here's another one.
I have never been more proud of someone and what they have had to endure.
Okay. Did everybody get that voice?
The last one? Oh, that's all I sent you, right?
That's all you sent.
Yeah. So that if nobody was able to recognize that, Wolf Blitzer, exactly.
Yeah, I got that. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And it's clear that it's getting better. And in the next, 2 years, you'll probably, be able to even do me.
And what we do also is when we have something when we can get involved in a project like that, in a project in general, we go in and fine tune with the tools that I just mentioned before. We fine tune the prosody, we fine tune the intonation, the inflections, and so on, to the point where it sounds like if it was recorded by the original voice at high quality.
Great. So I'm going to jump ahead to uses. So we talked about the first clip was done as an example for a producer in Italy who's revamping some old films and wants to be able to make the voiceovers match. And the other two were more demos. But do you have other clients or people that are thinking of using this technology for other uses, creating a branded voice, for instance? This is one of the things I read. If you could create a voice or a deep fake, basically, like a video as well. You could make create a new person take a bunch of different people, sort of mush them together, create a new person with a new voice, and that could be your announcer in a television commercial or a series of television commercials. And maybe you don't even have to pay an actor. I don't know if that's something that people are going for.
That's possible because our system is built around what we call the speaker embedding. And that means that we take a lot of speakers or lots of recordings from different styles and different voice qualities and so on. And we create a space where we can point to any part of that space in order to generate an amalgamate of multiple voices to create a new voice. So we have requests for branding voices in neutral voices, in males with specific qualities and female with specific qualities for different applications, including in the gaming industry, as an example. With other potentials in coming to us other than the entertainment and media, of course, in the newscast, as well as, believe it or not, even in the call centers. We're doing some work as well.
Great. Okay, we're going to move on pretty soon to some question and answers, if that's okay with everybody. Zach, are you still with us? I know he had to maybe jump off for a
few.
Okay, you're there. Great. So I'm going to do questions and answers. The first thing, somebody asked me if I could play Wolf Blitzer again. Yes, I will do that first. And then we're going to go on. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to unmute everybody and we'll have a little conversation for the next 10 minutes or so. Hold on one second. Let me share this one more time and play Wolf Blitzer. Here he is. Ready?
I have never been more proud of someone and what they have had to endure.
And one more time.
I have never been more proud of someone and what they have had to endure.
Interesting. Very, very good. Very good. Okay, let's open it up. I'm going to unmute everybody. And does anybody have any questions? If you have a question, I'm going to put you on gallery view. If you have any questions, it looks like people are still muted maybe, but if you have questions, go ahead. Jonathan first.
So Zach, just a question for you in terms of limitations. Both of the spots obviously were locked off. Was that a creative choice or is that a limitation of the technology?
That was a creative choice, but there's also, a limitation of the technology in the sense that if someone is spinning around and you have, as soon as someone starts to move their face, because it's really kind of a 2.5D kind of technology, for whatever that means, it's just not true 3D in my opinion. So you can't, it just takes a lot more work to get a face to sort of stay on and for it to look right. And just to give you an example, one of the major issues is there's the deepfake stops. And so there's a line. And so what we did was, in order to get around that, we styled the actor's hair like the respective dictators, the people we're trying to deepfake, and then did a slight blend to kind of blend the deep fake into the hair. And so really, if you think about it like, kind of a, 30-degree, sort of rotation kind of frontal effect, it works really, really well. But as soon as there's, even when the subject starts moving too much, it starts to, fall apart. So fortunately what we were doing is trying to show them in very natural speaking environments, and fortunately that sort of played into the strength of the technique. So as soon as you start pivoting and moving in different directions, stuff like that, it starts to work against the strength of a deep fake technology.
Right. Do you have a sense, having now worked with the deepfake technology, how far away it is from being able to be more flexible in terms of recreating?
A great question. I don't, I don't know, but I would assume that I was so blown away by the fact that we could input this footage and literally paint these people's faces and have it learn the nuances that, if you're doing, face replacement or whatever, you still need the actor's performance and everything to move that face to map it onto someone else. And so, to me, that's the huge step. And I would assume that the little blending and cut lines and the 360, the profile stuff, that's just around the corner. I think we're probably in the next couple of years, I'm sure they'll start to address that. I mean, the major thing is really as you guys know, is looking and realize these are just pixels, and it's all the nuances of these pixels are coming together to kind of to fool us and make it feel like it's really their faces, when of course it's not. It's just a bunch of pixels.
Just a bunch of pixels. And Brad, Zach, sorry, you had said that you had you did many multiple takes to get the sort of nuances in the performance that you wanted. Correct? It wasn't just a matter of.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the other thing is that and this speaks to the casting process, and we really started to learn it in when we actually sort of went and shot it. Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin are not the most charismatic public speakers if you kind of remove their kind of iconic sort of presence. And so, especially Kim Jong-un, I mean, like, he kind of mumbles through his speeches. And so that's not a very engaging performance. And so while we wanted it to be authentic, first and foremost, which is sticking to that script, we wanted there to be still some little things that sort of added to the charisma. So it really became the physical presence, obviously, one. And then, but speaking to the technique of deepfake in and of itself and how that affects performance, it really neutralizes the performance. So it's not as slightly more animated performance actually gets quite neutralized and dumbed down with deepfake. I'm talking about a subtlety and a nuance thing, but it affects things. So, would I prefer a little bit more animation and movement? Yeah, probably. But in terms of what we got away with was because these guys are normally kind of in those very kind of staid, neutral kind of positions. And also, you don't, just speaking to the voice thing, there's not a lot of footage of these guys speaking English. And so the voice was more forgiving with us because not a lot of people know Putin's voice exactly. So all we had to do was, and I kind of realized I was trying to match the voices, and I realized like there's maybe like one thing I found with Putin speaking English, and I said as long as we're kind of like 80% there, people are gonna buy it, because we just don't know his voice in English. So there was room for error in terms of matching voices.
Right. Anybody else? Any other questions?
I think it was.
Sorry, Dave.
It's a great job on the deep fake, and the whole creative idea behind it seems to me to have worked because of in the news and in the general world out there, everybody's suspicious of deep fakes. I'm going to post something in the chat. Years ago, there was a Dirt Devil commercial with Fred Astaire, and even though it was done tongue-in-cheek, the audience seemed to really reject the idea of somebody faking an icon of that stature for a brand. So I wonder on the brand side, on the advertising side, I think my gut is that brands are going to avoid, even at a comedic or a fun, creative level. I don't think people want to die. I don't think brands are going to want to, by committee, commit to a deep fake that touches an icon.
I don't know if that's true, Dave. I was at Frame Store when we did the Audrey Hepburn commercial for, which just got nothing but raves, and it took us a year to make it, mind you. So it was a little while ago. It's not like what they're dealing with now, but there's that. And then I know that the Mill did something with what's his name, the martial arts, Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee.
Yeah, they did a Bruce Lee spot, which I think was pretty well received too.
Yeah.
Oh, you think it's well received? I mean,
they both were well received.
I mean, the John Lennon Imagine, whoever that brand, that was not well received in my opinion.
I think, here's the thing. I think that it depends on how they're used, right? If you're trying to, if you're using them as a salesperson, I think you're not, you might not get such good response. But if you're using them to do, I mean, for instance, what we just did with the Represent Us bots, nobody's upset about using them for that purpose, except them maybe. But and it was done not tongue in cheek, but it was done above board. They didn't try to fake it. They say it right at the end. This isn't real. But so it depends, I think, on the use, and that's more the case. And what I was really interested in from a creative and a brand perspective is how can it be used, especially in these times of coronavirus? How can these technologies be used in a positive way or in a way that helps the brand get what they need to get done? Is it too hard? Is it too complicated? And it sounds like, no, it's actually getting to be fairly easy and getting to be better. So maybe it's, as Fathy says, you take the voice of this guy, somebody, and he licensed it. He's making money, but he doesn't have to show up at the studio. He doesn't have to go in. And during COVID, that's an important piece. That will end eventually, I assume, but something else will, are there reasons and uses that make sense? And I don't know if that's positive, negative, or anything. I'm just saying the technology is there. They're starting to get used. Are there moral reasons that we should be careful? Yes. Are there business reasons that we should say, oh, let's examine it? Or do we all stand back and say, oh, I'm not going to touch it? And that's one of the things I talked to Zach about. It's like, part of our, we're a great group of people. We have, we have limitations on what we'll do. Well, this is a very interesting question, right? If you're using it to make people feel something that they're not, do something that they wouldn't otherwise, maybe it's bad. But if you're getting them you're using it to help a brand get its message across in an overt way. It's kind of interesting. I mean,
it's freedom of expression, but it is art and commerce. So that throws a little bit of, use it wisely.
Right. Any other questions about the technology, how the technology works? Anybody?
Yeah, I think on the business side, I believe that the messaging that is going to be put behind the voice eventually with our stuff will make a big difference in how these licenses are written. From a business standpoint, this is going to be the most difficult part. That the do's and the don'ts will be the main part of caution for the voice that is licensing their own to be used for endorsement, for whatever else they're going to be used. You don't want to license your voice and let it go in the open to do porn as an example, right? Whether it's
right, or to be a brand message for a brand that you don't believe in.
That you don't believe in, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right now, it's if you want to use Arnold Schwarzenegger for something, you have to go, you have to ask him, you have to say, hey, you want to come do this? What's the guy who just did the Die Hard spot? Bruce Willis. You had to go and say, hey, you want to come do this? Can you imagine if you could do a deep fake with a deep fake voice and you could put Bruce Willis in that and he didn't believe in Die Hard batteries? I mean, that would be really not a good use. So,
yeah, I think, Michael, the issue becomes less about people who are living and, because they have control over their own personal choices. I think it's the estates where it starts to become more of a moral issue.
Yeah.
Because it all depends on who's guiding the estate, and where they stand.
Very true.
I was going to ask, are there any concerns over, Zach, when the commercial was made, were there any concerns from a legal perspective in having to clear these kind of things with any, there's that Seth Rogen film, wasn't there, when they, I can't remember the other actor, when they took on that Kim Jong-un persona, and it obviously caused a lot of upset in the native country. Were there any concerns from your end with that?
Yeah, with Represent Us, certainly. They took out, they had a cybersecurity team and all this stuff. For me personally, because I wasn't the agency or there was a mild concern, but I just sort of assume that because it's respectfully kind of a drop in the bucket, it's not some sort of major feature film, that they would have better things that they were sort of would be worried about than me. But certainly Represent Us as an organization that got a cybersecurity team, and I think the agency did as well. So there was some forethought with that stuff. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that you guys did a respectful, in a sense. Yes, you used them for this message, but it was fairly respectful. It was not, you weren't making them do porn.
No,
it was evident what you were trying to convey.
Yeah, who knows? The one thing that, I will add to that, the one thing that it was supposed to air on, and I wish that, Greg and his team would be able to speak to it more, but it was supposed to air on the debates, and especially the first debate. And at the last minute, it got, yanked. And I'm not sure if it was because, someone sort of, watched it and said, look, this is a deep fake and we don't allow deep fakes. Or if someone, looked at it and said, oh my God, Putin and Kim Jong-un are trying to buy airtime. probably the former. But certainly it's funny to sort of chuckle at the latter. And I think, but I thought that was really interesting, like it was going to air at the debates. It was going to have a big audience, and that coming on at the debates hopefully would have, at that point in time, our culture moves so quickly, it would have been great, and it got yanked. So that says something, it was, I think it was, I don't want to speak here, but I think it was Fox and ABC, I think, or whatever. It's not my end of it, so I kind of was like.
I will say that when I went looking for you, because I saw the spots and I thought it would be a good event for us to do at WheresSpot. It's usually pretty easy to figure out who did what. It was not as easy as normal to find you on this particular spot. Who did that spot? Nobody was quite sure that they wanted to say at first. It didn't take me that long, but there was definitely, people were definitely had a thought. We got about. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I would just add. I mean, I don't want to take the time, but I think it was by design. Like, Greg really said, like, let's put him out there and just kind of go quiet and see sort of, just to allow them to have an impact and for it not to be about the campaign or
you guys,
how
right.
it's done and us, and so we were all really on board with that and pretty behind, how to get the most bang for the product, with our goal.
Well, I will say this, and we have to wrap it up here because we've hit our time limit. Well, it's a fake time limit, deepfake time limit. But I am very impressed with you, Zach, and very impressed, Fathy, with your technology. I think there's some interesting things going on here. It's going to open up a lot of questions. And I'm glad and I'm really pleased that you joined us to help us understand it. I think, I'll put this up on our site and other people will get a chance to learn about it. I think there's some interesting stuff going on. And Zach, I think your work's fabulous. You've got great, it's mostly comedy, this was not comedy. So I really applaud you for taking this one on. I think you're mostly comedy. Is that how you would define yourself, or character?
It seems like people send me a lot of comedy stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this was great. I appreciate it. And Fathy, I can't wait to see and hear the future of what you come up with. I'd love to send you a script and have you put it in your system and see what it sounds like. That'd be so interesting.
I would be very happy to give it a try.
Okay, fantastic. Last chance for a question. And if not, I'm going to throw up. I'm going to share my screen again.
I have a question.
Yeah, Sandra.
Is there where are we at in terms of technologies being able to detect deepfakes? And also, is there anything in terms of like a regulatory framework or some sort of body that's working towards some sort of set of ground rules for the community and for businesses when it comes to making these?
Yeah, I mean, two great questions. I wish I knew the answers. I hope there are answers out there, because I do think that it needs to be monitored, especially as it grows and gets tougher and tougher to detect. And varying degrees of responsibility out there in terms of the people making it. But there must be something. I do think they got. Maybe they got pulled because of the content. I'd have to look into it and get back, but those are great questions, and I wish I knew the answers. But
I did do a little research before we did this, and I found two things. That the answer is they are working on technology to do it. The top, Facebook, Google, Twitter, these guys I think have a team that are working together. They actually had my understanding is there's a competition between them to come up with the best technology to determine, to find these things. They're talking about it, but I bet you there's more detail in it than we know. And there's probably some, Fathy may be able to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, if I can comment on the voice part. We ran a number of politicians, no names mentioned, and we also had the technology for speaker identification that's used in banks and so on. So at that time, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, actually 4 years ago, and our quality was better, not as good as it is today. And so we ended up feeding all these politicians into our speaker ID system. And we generated from one of the politicians another sentence or two to do the speaker ID. And it just happens that on some it failed, so it identified as somebody who's not in that group. And on one or two, it did miss it. it did think that it is a real thing coming through the speaker ID. And that is a very dangerous situation, of course, with the technology in the wrong hands. Yeah.
One of the things I read or I heard, and that there's some links on the thing which I'll put up again at the end, that there was a situation where somebody used a fake voice technology to basically call this guy, a top level financial guy, and he was asked to make a transfer, and the guy knew the guy's voice, so he made a transfer, and so he lost a bunch of money. So
it's not. I would also add, just on the other end of the spectrum, like obviously deepfake has a lot of sort of nefarious connotations, I guess, or it has that sort of attachment to it. But I think in the coming years, it'll be interesting to see how it's used in other ways, and how that has an effect on, us being able to read. Like I heard or read somewhere that Stephen Merchant's doing a comedy show where like the central comedic device is deep faking. And so it'll be interesting to see if that's a show that takes off and it's in the zeitgeist and stuff like that, what that does for the conversation, but certainly there's a lot of potential to do a lot of harm and things.
Yeah.
So hopefully it is. I'm sure it's being policed.
Yeah. Okay. Let me share this one last time. I am going to just to go through it really quick. And again, this is correctly spelled, I believe.
Thank you very much.
H morphine. Sorry about that, Fathy.
No problem at all.
And
no problem.
Here are the links to the videos we saw, the links to Zach's reel, and to speech morphine, as well as these two learning things. One of them is done by, I think, somebody from Google, and one of them is the moon event disaster is an interesting thing to watch. They use deepfake to create a moon disastrous space event. So anyway, that's it for today, and I appreciate it. Again, once again, let me thank everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Nice meeting you, everybody.